Are you familiar with your shadow? In today's video, we are going to talk all about shadow work, the importance of doing shadow work, how to find your shadow, and how to integrate and heal it. So if you've ever had any curiosity around this topic, this training is for you, so be sure to keep watching. Hello Starshine, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jen. I'm a spiritual life and business coach, and you have found your way to my YouTube channel. This is where I create a new training for you each and every week, all about the art of up-leveling your life from the inside out, using tools that have to do with mindset and manifestation. So if that sounds like something that you are interested in, then be sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. So as I said at the top, today we are talking all about shadow work, and specifically about what a shadow is, what shadow work is, how you can figure out what your shadow is, and how you can start to heal it. As I said at the beginning, you have probably heard about shadow work if you are in the world of psychology, personal development, or even manifestation, but you still might not really have a deep understanding of what the shadow is and why it is so important for us to do this work. That is why I'm doing this training for you today. So I really hope that this goes a long way towards clearing up any questions you might have about shadow. And I hope that it inspires you to actually take this knowledge and apply it to your own life. As we get into it, you're going to start to understand the importance of this. And really, when it comes down to it, shadow is something that I talk about all the time, even if I might not be using that specific word. So without any further ado, let's get into the training today. So let's get started by first talking about what the shadow is exactly. So I'm going to give you two different definitions, and this is really going to help to create a deeper understanding about what the shadow is and why it is so important for you to work on it. So the classic psychological definition of the shadow would be any repressed part of yourself. This would all go back to your childhood, as so many of my videos do. We talk about childhood stuff so much. That's because it really does have a big impact on our life even now. So basically, we all learned how to repress some part of ourselves when we were children. We were kind of shown or told directly by our parents that some part of us was shameful or not desirable. So think about any emotions that you might have, like greed or anger or jealousy. So when you're a little kid and you're experiencing these very normal emotions, you might experience shame when you express these things because your parents don't want to see you have these so-called parts, bad parts of yourself, which really doesn't make any sense at all because of course we all have these things. So basically what happens is, say a little child experiences anger or experiences jealousy or whatever the emotion might be, and their parent makes them feel ashamed for having that emotion. So this is like the complete opposite of emotional intelligence, right? Instead of learning how to express this emotion, how to acknowledge it, and how to move past it, instead what we learn how to do is to repress it and to pretend that that part of ourselves doesn't exist. So basically, anytime you repress part of yourself or anytime you have a rejection of something that is occurring inside of you, you are creating a shadow. That part of you does not go away. It just becomes something that you no longer express. And the more that you go through life not expressing or acknowledging that part of you, the bigger and darker and more powerful this shadow can get. So that is the kind of the classic psychological Carl Jung inspired definition of shadow. But I would like to take that a little step further and also make the word shadow include different aspects of ourselves. So for example, say you went through an awkward phase at the age of like 13, when you were, in between, puberty and being a child. And it's like that kind of time when you're feeling weird in your body and you haven't quite figured out how to dress yourself properly and all of that stuff just yet. yet. Sometimes we experience shame just from being who we are. Maybe somebody in our class makes fun of us. Maybe we were taunted for the way we were developing or something like that. So at that point in time, that can also create a shadow. Maybe somebody on the school ground is taunting you or calls you a name or something like that. And then that kind of wound can grow into a shadow itself. And that kind of wound can actually grow to have a huge effect on you in later life as well. So when it comes to your parents, or when it comes to somebody calling you a name on the playground, sometimes what happens is that you realize that that part of you has been met with rejection or judgment or shame or whatever it is. So part of your brain does its best to protect you from ever experiencing that again by figuring out how to never let this happen to you again. So for example, maybe you were taunted for not being athletic at some point in your life, and to get over that, you decided to become a super jock and you went out and learned how to run and play all these sports and to really overcome the way people projected things onto you. So that can carry on into adulthood. We can still be going through life as an adult, you know, trying to basically get the approval of, you know, the kids on the playground 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So these things can really play out in our life over and over again unless we bring awareness to it. I'm going to get more into the importance of shadow work in a moment. So those are the two psychological ways that we usually talk about shadow. But in the spiritual world, of course, we can take shadow work a little bit deeper, and actually a lot of shamanic work is really just shadow work. And really what Carl Jung did is take this like traditional shamanic way of approaching people and apply it in sort of a scientific, modernized way. When it comes to shamanism, usually the work centers around integrating different aspects of you or different parts of you. And this kind of work would really center around past lives or around things that maybe happened to you that were not during this lifetime. And maybe that sounds a little weird at first, but just for now, all you need to know is that shadow work can stem from your childhood, rejections and repressions, and it can also stem from stuff that occurred before you incarnated on this planet. We all come to this earth with a sort of job and with a sort of sense of karma, things that we need to act out, learn, heal during our time here on earth. So this is our karma. We're here to work things off. We're here to learn certain lessons. So yes, in other words, you might have some shadow work hanging over you that you can't remember because it did not occur in this lifetime. But if you step into the world of spirituality and you work with somebody like a shaman, that can really shed a light on how these patterns are, again, repeating in your adult life, are coming up in your current existence, are creating blocks as you go through life. So to sum up, a shadow is just basically any part of yourself that you are not aware of, any repressed part of you, any rejected part of you, and that can be anything that has happened to you, again, during this lifetime, especially during your childhood, or something that is carrying over from a previous lifetime that you are essentially being sent here to heal and to work on. So the next question is, what is shadow work? So shadow work is basically the art of taking your shadow, looking at your shadow, and doing the healing work to integrate it. So integration is really what we're after here, because of course the whole problem with the shadow is the stuff that we don't acknowledge is the stuff that ends up ruling over us. So again, I'm going to use the quote that I always use from Carl Jung, which is, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule over you and you will call it fate. Basically, that in a nutshell sums up the importance of shadow work. The stuff that you do not acknowledge, that you do not name, that you do not do the work to heal and reprogram is the stuff that is going to keep you trapped in a pattern, in a loop, in feeling like you can't make progress in a different area in your life, or feeling like something is always working against you. So integration is how we basically unite the will, how we heal the wounds, how we take back that repressed part of ourselves, those rejected part of ourselves, and we make ourselves whole again. So integration is really all about becoming a whole version of you. It is about acknowledging the darker parts of ourselves, the uglier parts of ourselves, and loving us wholly, unconditionally, and then that way we can start to break free of the ways the shadow is tripping us up. So as I already mentioned, a lot of the work that I do is really revolving around shadow. A lot of the stuff in our subconscious mind is really shadow work. So when I'm talking about subconscious reprogramming, reparenting, any of that kind of stuff, a lot of that has to do with shadow. So shadow healing is an essential element for anybody who wishes to be a conscious creator, who is really involved in the aspect of wanting to create the results that they want in their life, to truly designing their life and going out and creating their life. Because of course, if you do not do this work, eventually you are going to find yourself running up against one of the symptoms of the shadow. So that brings me to my next point. So now I want to tell you why it is so important for you to do shadow work. There are really 3 reasons that I can think of right now, there's probably more, for you to do shadow work in your own life. The first reason why you want to do shadow work is, like I just mentioned, this stuff is going to repeat in your life. The blocks, the repeating patterns, all these things are going to play out in your life until you do the work to reprogram them, to heal them, to get beyond them. That's because you are not integrating, you are not learning the lesson, you are not even seeing what the barrier is that you keep running up against. So shadow work is going to help unlock what is bothering you right now. If you are feeling, again, stuck, or like you're in a rut, or like you just can't make progress in a certain area in your life, I really suggest thinking about your shadow, and I'm going to give you more ways to do that in just a moment. The second reason why you want to do shadow work is the law of attraction reason. So you might not be realizing it, but the way the law of attraction works, of course, is that like attracts like, and basically what you focus on always expands. So maybe your unconscious or subconscious mind is focusing on something that you don't really want, and you're not even really aware of it. But the more that you are focused in this direction, the more you are going to attract that thing into your life. So that could create more drama, more chaos, more undesirable results. And you might just feel like you're unlucky, or like things just aren't working out, or like the law of attraction doesn't work for you, when in fact it is working. The thing that is just happening is that the wrong part of you is magnetizing things into your life. So that is another very important reason why you want to do shadow work. The last reason why shadow work is so important and why you want to make sure that you do it is because the more that you feed your shadow, the bigger and more magnetizing it gets. So basically, the more that we allow that part of ourselves to grow, the more it's going to attract the experiences that we don't want into our life. So you really want to think about that, because again, this is stuff that you don't really consciously know about. Of course, you don't consciously know what your shadow is until you do this work. But that part of you might be getting fed by you in many different ways without you even realizing it. And feeding it makes it bigger and stronger. And when that part of you is magnetizing a lot, it might be creating a lot of road bumps. Again, a lot of chaos, a lot of the things that you don't want. So we really need to become aware of what we're doing so that we don't feed that part of ourselves and make it too big and too out of control. I mean, I shouldn't say too big and too out of control. You can always get control back. But of course, we want to minimize it. We want to heal it. We want to integrate it so that we are friends with that part of ourselves instead of pushing it away or acting out in weird ways that we don't really understand. Okay, so now that we understand what shadow is, what shadow work is, and why you need to do shadow work, let's get into the stuff that you can take and actually apply into your life. So in this section, I'm going to talk about some symptoms of the shadow, as well as some tools to help integrate the shadow for each one of these symptoms. So this is the stuff that you can probably take right now and recognize and start applying in your life right now. So the first symptom of the shadow that you might want to notice so that you can start to begin this process on yourself is noticing your triggers. So we all have triggers. We all have little hot button issues that turn us from this calm person into an angry person or a really upset person. And sometimes it feels like we don't really understand why we're having a certain reaction. I'm sure you can probably relate to this. So triggers might feel annoying, and it might be really tempting to step into your victim mentality and say to yourself, well, that cashier shouldn't have treated me like this, or this friend shouldn't have done that to me, or this shouldn't have happened. But to bring it back to a spiritual perspective, remember that life is always happening for you, not to you. So anytime a trigger is coming up for you, this is just really highlighting something that you need to work on. So in the case of triggers can bring up our shadow in that we can have a really strong reaction about something, especially when it has something to do with a repressed part of ourselves or some part of ourselves that we are trying to hide away from. So for example, if your parents made you feel unsafe for being sensitive as a child, you might have learned how to cope with that by becoming strong and tough and like creating this exterior that nothing can get to you. And then you get into your adulthood and somebody says something to you that accuses you of being too sensitive, and you basically freak out because you're not sensitive. Why would they even say that, right? But what's really happening here is that, of course, back in your childhood, you were sensitive, and learning how to be tough or how to be strong was your coping mechanism. It is how you dealt with the trauma of having that experience of being rejected and judged by your parents. So now that you're an adult, somebody has accidentally pushed your buttons and they have gone into that part of your subconscious brain that created a huge safety net around it, right? Now you've had years of thinking of yourself as being the tough person, the person who never lets anything get to them, the person who's really cool and unemotional. So when someone steps on that button that goes directly back to that thing that happened in your childhood, you might blow up, you might overreact, you might lash out, you might do all kinds of things. But what is really happening here is just that in real life, somebody is just triggering something that goes back to a coping mechanism that you created as a child and that you learned how to use throughout your life. Those coping strategies, those things that we do to protect ourselves, to hide that repressed version of ourselves, those are very deeply wired into us, and it really concerns our ego when those things are questioned. When this happens to you, whenever you are feeling triggered by something and you're not really sure why, the most important question to ask yourself is, why am I feeling this way? Or what was the first time that I ever remember having this experience? When was the first time I was ever called sensitive? Or what do I remember from my childhood about this incident? Again, these protection mechanisms, these ways of coping that we learned as a child are going to be really tough to crack, but they can really lead you directly to the source of your shadow. So as an adult, if you are triggered, get curious, get questioning about where this is coming from, and try to bring this back to something else from your past. It will probably lead you to some part of yourself that you have just learned how to repress, ignore, pretend isn't there, and that is really a piece of your shadow. So when you notice it, when you recognize it, that is the first step towards healing it. I'm gonna give you some more tips on healing after this section, but just hang tight for now and just understand that a trigger is always, almost always, a big red flashing light directing you to your shadow. The second symptom of shadow and the tools that we can use to start to heal our shadow, the symptom is projection. So again, this is something we all do without even noticing, but again, from a spiritual perspective, it is really important to remember that the world around us is just a mirror, and especially our relationships with other people, they are just a mirror. So in other words, when somebody in the world or somebody, a friend of yours, a family member of yours is doing something that really bothers you and you're feeling very offended or very hurt or very whatever, it is really important for you to understand that that aspect that you are so upset by, that you are judging so harshly, is really something that you hold inside. It is much easier for us to see things in the outer world than it is to notice them in ourselves. And especially in the case of the shadow, when we are talking about a repressed part of ourselves or a rejected part of ourselves, when we see that in other people, it can completely blow us up. It can really create a reaction in ourselves. And that's because we've worked so hard to repress or reject that part of us. So when we recognize that in someone else, that can really push our buttons. So again, if there is somebody who is driving you crazy at work, in your family, in a romantic relationship, wherever, it is really a key sign for you to sit down, sit back, and start to question where this is really coming from. So again, I would suggest maybe making a list, writing down the thing that is offending you, writing down the thing that you are so upset by, and really asking yourself with bravery and love whether that exists in yourself, whether this is just a part of yourself that you have repressed or rejected and have done a lot of work to run away from. So when we've done a lot of work to run away from something, of course, when we see someone else expressing that, it can create this like weird internal reaction where we're kind of on one spiritual level, maybe jealous of them for being able to express that when we don't think we can, even though we have that stuff inside of us. Relationships are here to heal us. The world is a mirror. That's because it is here to heal us. So when you see these issues in the world, it isn't about going out there and getting someone else to do something different so you can feel better. It is about you learning how to integrate, heal, accept, love on yourself. So again, projections that you have, the things that really irritate you in other people, that is really another invitation for you to check in with your shadow. Okay, shadow symptom number 3 is a repeating pattern or a feeling like you're stuck in a rut or like you're in a loop. So again, this can be a symptom of our shadow because, again, to bring it to a spiritual perspective, nothing in our life is just what it appears to be on the surface. So perhaps you are dating and you are really wanting an amazing, aligned, loving relationship, yet you keep dating the same kind of person and it ends in the same kind of way. And you're feeling like, what is wrong with me? Why do I keep attracting these kinds of guys or girls or whatever? Again, this might be a symptom of a repressed shadow or a rejection of ourselves because we're not really getting on board with what we are desiring. For this particular example that I'm bringing up, I would suggest thinking in terms of reparenting. So there's our conscious desires for what we want, and then there's also our unconscious desires, and those unconscious desires, again, are part of the shadow. As disturbing as it sounds, many of us subconsciously go after people that remind us of a certain parent of ours. That's because we are trying to reenact and create a different outcome to the love experience that we did not get as a child. So this is like when you think of somebody, a girl with daddy issues, that is exactly what's happening. They had a distant, cold parent. Therefore, as an adult, they end up dating distant, cold people. Subconsciously, their brain is telling them that this is what love is like, and that maybe if we get close to this person, we can get back the love that we really want and really desire. Of course, in the real world, that doesn't work out. If you keep dating the cold, distant person, they're going to continue to be cold and distant because that is their nature. Yet, so many people continue through this pattern, continue through this loop, continue doing the same thing over and over again, hoping to get a different result. So again, if you are feeling stuck, if you are feeling like you're repeating something, if you're calling the same person into your life over and over again, one thing to check might be your shadow. What part of you, what's your secret desire? What's your repressed desire? What is the repressed part of you desiring? Who do you really want to be with? Like, all of these things are really important questions to ask yourself to help you gain a better understanding of you and to ultimately kickstart the healing process. So when we can shed a little bit of light onto the shadow, that is when we give ourselves the opportunity to heal and therefore create a new result. If you do not do this work, again, you're going to probably go around in circles, dating the same person, working the same job, creating the same results, and you're not able to figure out why. This might be why. So really think about this again. Really be brave enough to ask yourself these questions. Go back to your childhood. Be brave enough to get really honest and to really acknowledge what is happening inside of you. And usually you can come up with something that is a really great way to start the healing process. Shadow work symptom number 4 would be a polarity desires. So especially in the world of manifestation, this is a really important thing to think about. So for example, so many people want to manifest like a lot of money or like a great relationship or something like that. And again, they're finding resistance about that. They find like they just can't get past where they are right now. And they feel really frustrated, or they feel really like the law of attraction isn't working, or that there's something wrong with them, or that there's a curse on them or something like that. So what is actually happening here is that our conscious brain wants one thing, yet our subconscious brain wants something else. It is really important to remember, as I talk about in pretty much all of my videos, that your subconscious brain's ultimate goal is to keep you safe, and it thinks that keeping you safe means keeping you exactly the same as you are right now. So it does not want you to go and do new things. It does not want you to go meet new people, go to new bars, go to new restaurants, go to a new city. It doesn't want you to do any of that stuff. It wants you to stay at home, and at home, doing the same thing is exactly how you stay in the same place. So no matter how juicy and delicious and extravagant your conscious desire might be, it's a really important thing to do is to ask your subconscious mind why it might not be on board, okay? So even if you want a lot of money, for example, so of course you can probably think of all kinds of amazing things to do with that money. But if you do the shadow work and you stop for a moment and start to think about what your subconscious brain wants, you might be surprised to find out that it is really worried about a lot of things. Perhaps your subconscious brain is worried that your parents won't love you anymore if you have a lot of money. Or maybe your subconscious brain is worried that all your relatives are going to ask you for loans if you suddenly have a lot of money. Or maybe your subconscious brain thinks that your friends won't like you anymore if you have a lot of money. So when you have one part of your brain going this way and one part of your brain going this way, that is the perfect recipe to stay here. You're not making progress. You're feeling stuck. You're not magnetizing yourself to anything new. So again, when it comes to shadow work, it is really important for us to acknowledge these dark sides of our desires, to acknowledge the polarity that exists in everything. So every single thing that you can think of, there is always a dark side. And when you can acknowledge that and heal it and integrate it, that is when you give yourself the strength to get beyond it instead of getting stuck by it. So I really would challenge you, especially my manifesting students, if you are trying to do something right now and you're feeling stuck or you're feeling like you're not making progress, sit down, get real, think about what your subconscious is afraid of, and then start to do the work on how you can integrate that and create a new result. So the fifth and final symptom of the shadow that I want to bring up today is the manifestations. So if you are again, bringing in a bunch of things that you don't want into your life, if you are, trying to get a new job, move to a new country, do this stuff, and things are getting in your way, and there's roadblocks, there's obstacles, there's this, there's that, whatever. I mean, there's a few different reasons that might be happening, but this might be one of them. Your shadow might be manifesting all of the things that can stop you because it is really afraid of you doing the thing. So again, when our will is divided, when one wheel is going this way and one wheel is going that way, we're going nowhere. When our will is divided, we cannot move forward. We cannot create the results that we want. So if you are manifesting the opposite of what you want, if you are manifesting things that you did not ask for repeatedly, if you just find yourself not only stuck, but calling in more of what you don't want, I would really suggest to think about your shadow. Think about what your shadow really wants. We all have weird subconscious desires, including desires to be poor, including desires to be alone, including desires to be rejected by certain people. For example, maybe you secretly love the drama and love the action and the attention, and you love complaining about not having money. Or maybe it's that, but it applies to love. Maybe you really love sitting with your girls on a Friday night and complaining about all the terrible dates you just went on. Maybe you really love feeling like a victim and feeling like you don't belong anywhere. So you're creating more of that because part of you is really into that idea of feeling like the lone wolf or like the rejected person. So the first thing to understand is that it is completely okay for part of you to like that. And actually, when you start to acknowledge that and give into it a little bit, that is when you can start to show your brain that, oh, hey, like I've given in, hey, you've had fun, this is great, but now let's go do something else. So if you don't do that, again, that part of you, that unexpressed, repressed part of you is going to keep ruling over you because you're not doing this work. But if you can lean into it, lean into that darkness, lean into those desires that you don't want to admit out loud, lean into it for a little bit and see how that can shift things. Because a lot of times that's all we need to do. We are secretly manifesting exactly what we want at all times. So figure out why you are manifesting what you have right now so that you can start to manifest what you really want. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up this video by giving you a few more tools that you can use to work with your shadow. With each one of those symptoms, I gave you a sort of tool or a little bit of a jumping off point for you to look into that a little more. But these tips at the end are going to help really bring this work to another level. The thing is with shadow, this stuff has been hanging around us for an entire life. So it's not like, unfortunately, you can't just watch this video and like clear your karma, clear your shadow. It's gonna take a little bit of work by you. But these tools that I'm offering you right now are really going to help you to gain control, learn how to integrate, and finally free you from any of this karma drama that might be following you around. The first most important tool to remember when you're going through the work of the shadow is just full self-love and self-acceptance. In other words, if you are judging yourself as you go through this, if you are judging that part of yourself that secretly wants to stay poor or stay single, you are just creating another shadow. You're creating another part of yourself that's repressed and rejected. So the most important thing to remember is that it is up to us to fully love and fully compassionately accept ourselves. And that includes the parts that aren't pretty and aren't cool and aren't socially acceptable. Again, this might be hard because we learned as little kids not to talk about certain things, to pretend that we don't have certain emotions, to be the good boy or good girl. But we are not all just good boys and good girls. We all have that bad side, that naughty side, that dark side. And that's okay. It's okay to acknowledge those things. Like, you don't need to go publicly acknowledge them, but you can acknowledge them to yourself. You can see what is there. You can understand those desires and know that those desires do not make you inherently evil or unlovable. They are all just part of you being human. And the more that you run away again and repress and reject, the bigger the shadow gets. So it all really starts with self-love and full acceptance, not judgment, not running away. The second tool that might really help you out with shadow work, as you might have guessed, is reparenting. So especially when it comes to the repressed stuff that we are holding back from our childhood, the emotions that we never learned how to express, the desires that we never learned how to express, that stuff can really be healed by some reparenting work. So reparenting work can be done by anybody, whether your parents are alive or no longer with us. This is not work that needs to actually get them involved. Reparenting work is all about you as a whole person in your adult form, going back, thinking on the things that happened to you and being able to extend that version of you, the child version of you, feeling shame or judgment or rejection or whatever it was, giving that version of you love. And when you can do that, and usually you do that through a hypnosis session, you can create a healed version of you now. So of course we can't go back in time and actually go back then and actually change other people's actions and make them say the things that we really wanted them to say or do the things we really wanted them to do, but we can create that effect by learning how to do it for ourselves. So I really suggest reparenting or inner child work for pretty much anybody, because we all have had these experiences. We've all experienced these mini traumas, and these experiences very often create rejected or repressed versions of us, and that creates our shadow. So that is another tool for you to look into. The third tool, this will help you if your rejected parts of yourselves did not occur in this lifetime. This would be past life regression. Again, from a spiritual perspective, we are all here on a spiritual journey. We've all been given a karma. We've all been given basically things that we need to work on, themes that we need to work through, basically learning how to love on something in our life, because love is always the answer. Fear is always what human brain wants to do, but when we can come to something with love, that is when we learn how to heal it. So if something has happened to you in the past, if there's ancestral trauma, generational trauma, then past life regression might be a good way for you to deal with that. So if you're doing this shadow work and there's still stuff that's coming up that you can't really put a finger on why, or there's a reaction you're having and it really doesn't make sense with the childhood that you have, then maybe this is what you should be looking at. So I don't do past life regression, but there are lots of people that do. So just know that that is available to you if you are feeling stuck and if you feel like maybe that's part of your shadow that needs help, because if you feel like it is, it probably is. The next thing that can help you out with the shadow, again, it is something to do with past, with ancestral trauma, with inherited trauma. This would be timeline therapy. So timeline therapy is an NLP hypnosis technique where basically people can heal parts of you from this current time that maybe happened before you were born, or maybe happened in the future even, because time is not Newtonian as we've been taught to believe. Time is actually all happening at the same time. So timeline therapy is, again, not something that I do, but it is another tool for helping you with your shadow, especially if there's something that you can't locate. You're experiencing an issue over and over again, and it doesn't make sense with what happened to you in your childhood. You can't figure out where it came from. Again, think on ancestry, think about karma, think about inherited stuff. All of that might be a really important tool, and timeline therapy can help you with that. And another tool that can really help you to do a lot with shadow work is parts integration, which is an NLP technique, which basically you can acknowledge these deep desires that your conscious mind has and your subconscious mind has. So we basically take them together, smush them together, and figure out how you can come together as an integrated person. I really believe this does a lot for your shadow. But of course, again, you first have to figure out what your shadow is, what you're trying to heal, what the issue is, and that is really the block for most of us. So awareness is the first key. All of these modalities are just going to help you to take it to the next level. But if you are interested in integrating your shadow and doing a session, I do sessions for parts integration. So if you want to book one, go ahead and reach out. I don't have them currently on my website, but I do offer them as a one-off. So this is another really powerful tool to help you integrate and heal and get beyond whatever's holding you back. Okay, so that's all I've got for you today in the world of shadow and shadow work and integrating your shadow. I really hope that this video today has illuminated what can be sometimes still a dark and scary world. I know that the word shadow makes people a little nervous, and it inspires a sort of feeling of dread, like you're gonna come up with something like really terrible, but that's kind of the whole point. The more fear you have around it, the scarier it seems, the less likely you are going to be to do it, but that just feeds your shadow more and it keeps you more and more stuck. So I really hope that if you found this video at all interesting today, if this is resonating on any level, I really hope that you take these principles to heart. Start asking yourself the tough questions. Start looking at yourself as a whole person. Give yourself permission to be perfectly, imperfectly human. We all contain light and dark, and that is just the way we are. So lean into it, accept it, integrate it, heal it, and watch your whole life change. Again, if you are interested in doing more shadow work, I again offer parts integration, NLP hypnosis. I can do a bunch of different modalities that will really help you to work through this, including like a longer coaching package, because most of this, again, won't go away in just one session. So if you're interested in that, come on over to the site. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video today. I really hope that this illuminated a dark subject and inspired you to take this powerful work and apply it to your own life. If you liked this video today, give me a thumbs up. If you know somebody that could use this message, do me another favor and pass it along to them. Other than that, I'll be back here in the next video. So until then, happy healing. I love you guys so much and have an amazing week.